Amanda discovered that her husband, Jared, was cheating on her with her closest friend when she inadvertently discovered their confidential message on his mobile device. She secretly changed her lover's phone number and his contacts to the work number of her husband, who was a federal prosecutor. And now Jared was sending naughty text messages and private pictures to the completely wrong recipient. When the deceived spouse came to him, something terrible happened. Something that Amanda couldn't have predicted at all. The official car stopped at the entrance to the residential complex an hour ahead of schedule. Amanda paid off the driver and climbed the familiar steps, looking forward to reuniting with her husband after a 5-day business trip to Denver. Negotiations with business partners were extremely productive. The contract had been signed, and now she just wanted to melt into Jared's arms, share with him everything that had happened these days. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click, and Amanda stepped through the threshold of her apartment. The hallway was a bit of a mess. Elegant ladies' high-heeled shoes stood next to Jared's work boots, casually kicked off right at the entrance. Amanda frowned at the elegant black pumps with scarlet soles. She recently saw such a pair in an expensive shoe salon when she went shopping with Charlotte. Her friend tried on this particular brand for a long time, admiring the quality of Italian leather. Amanda's heart sank with apprehension, but she tried to find a rational explanation. Perhaps Charlotte dropped by to show off her new clothes? Or were they discussing work issues with Jared? After all, her husband practiced law, and Charlotte worked in commercial real estate. Business meetings at home happened regularly, especially when it came to making significant deals. Amanda took off her raincoat and hung it in the closet, trying not to wonder why the apartment was so quiet. She went into the living room, but there was no one there. The coffee table was littered with legal papers. Decorative pillows were crumpled on the sofa. There were 2 empty coffee cups on the kitchen sink. There were cookie crumbs nearby. It looked as if the visitors had left quite recently, not having had time to clean up after themselves. Amanda automatically began to wash the dishes, trying to calm her growing anxiety. A sound from the bedroom made her freeze. It sounded like the rustle of cloth or the creak of a parquet floor. Amanda wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and headed down the hall, feeling her pulse quicken. The door to the marital bedroom was ajar, and the faint hum of a running fan could be heard from there. Amanda pushed the door open and froze on the threshold. On their large bed, on the spotless white linens that she had washed and ironed herself before leaving, there was a set of lace underwear, an ivory bra with a golden pattern, and identical panties that she remembered perfectly. A month ago, she and Charlotte visited boutiques, choosing something special for a romantic date with their husbands. Charlotte then spent a decent amount on this set of French lingerie, trying it on several times and asking for Amanda's opinion. Amanda's legs gave out and she sank onto the edge of the mattress. The lace fabric was still warm, as if it had been taken off just a minute ago. Next to the underwear was a hair clip, which Charlotte always used when she gathered her long, dark blonde locks into a bun. Amanda picked up the hairpin with trembling fingers, and nausea rose in her throat. There was a faint trace of lipstick on the metal surface, the same color her best friend always used. Snatches of recent conversations flashed through my mind. Charlotte complained that Gregory had become indifferent to her, but their family life had become routine. Jared has also been somewhat distant lately, often staying late at the office, canceling planned leisure activities together. Amanda attributed it to the intense fatigue and nervous tension associated with his law practice. Now, all these little things added up to a nightmarish picture of treachery. She got out of bed and went to the bathroom, hoping to find there at least some refutation of her worst suspicions. Maybe it's not that obvious. Perhaps there is a logical explanation for what is happening. There were 2 champagne glasses on a shelf in the bathroom. There was a lipstick mark on one of them. Next to it was an empty bottle of the very expensive sparkling wine that she and Jared had been saving for exceptional events. On the edge of the sink was a man's smartphone in a familiar dark case. Jared always forgot it in the most unexpected places, and Amanda was already used to collecting these gadgets for him. The screen was active, and the messaging program's window was glowing on it. Amanda picked up the phone in disbelief. The correspondence was open, and the contact's name made her heart literally stop. Charlotte with a heart next to her name and a photo of her in a bikini. The last message was sent about 30 minutes ago. "Last night was incredible, baby. Amanda doesn't smell anything. This simpleton thinks I'm fishing with the guys. I can't wait to caress every inch of your body again. Amanda reread the text several times, unable to comprehend the reality of what was happening. My fingers started scrolling up by themselves. The messages dated back to the last 4 months, and each one was a painful blow. Jared wrote about how hungry he was for Charlotte's touch, how he dreamed of spending the whole weekend with her. Charlotte responded no less passionately, describing her fantasies and plans for their next date. Pictures flashed between the text messages, from which Amanda had to look away. She was shaking so hard that the phone almost slipped out of her hands. In the correspondence, she found video clips filmed in their own bedroom on their bed. Charlotte was wearing the lace set that was currently lying on the bed. Jared kissed her neck and whispered words of love that were once meant only for Amanda. The date of the shooting indicated that the video was shot yesterday, when Amanda was away on business. Then the correspondence became even more explicit. Charlotte wrote to Jared saying that she wanted to get pregnant with his child and get away from boring Greg, as she called her husband, the prosecutor. Jared replied that he was ready to leave boring Mandy and start a new life with her. They discussed vacation plans together, the rent of the apartment they were going to rent, and even names for future babies. Amanda sank onto the cool tiled bathroom floor and sobbed uncontrollably. 10 years of living together, common goals, dreams of children who never happened. All this time, she considered Charlotte her most loyal friend, shared her most personal experiences with her, asked for advice in difficult moments, and she slept with her husband and planned to ruin her fate. The tears dried up as suddenly as they had come. Deep despair was replaced by chilling rage. Amanda got up from the floor and picked up her smartphone again. Her fingers were trembling, but not from grief, but from anger. If these two want to play dirty games, she will show them what real revenge is. Gregory Foster, Charlotte's husband, was notorious for his jealousy and intemperance. Their entire social circle remembered the recent scandal at a corporate event, when he almost got into a fight with a colleague who was too insistent on asking Charlotte to dance. Amanda went to her contact list and found Charlotte's entry. Next to it was Gregory's number, which she knew by heart. With trembling hands, she began editing the contact Charlotte, erasing her actual number and entering her husband's number. She left her name and heart intact. Now, all the intimate messages that Jared will send to his beloved will be received by her deceived husband. After the changes were saved, Amanda carefully removed all traces of her presence on the phone. She erased her usage history, emptied the trash of deleted files, and even wiped the screen from fingerprints. She carefully returned the smartphone to the edge of the sink. In the same way, she collected and hid Charlotte's lace underwear in the washing machine so that Jared would not suspect that someone was at home. Amanda returned to the living room and sat down in an armchair with a view of the front door. The wait wasn't long. Half an hour later, the key turned in the lock and Jared appeared in the doorway. He looked smug and relaxed. His hair was slightly disheveled, and she noticed a faint trace of lipstick on the collar of his shirt. When he saw his wife, he was taken aback for a moment, but quickly pulled himself together. "Mandy, are you back yet? I was expecting you only in the evening." He came over and kissed her briefly on the cheek, and Amanda smelled an unfamiliar male cologne. The negotiations ended earlier. "I decided to surprise you," she replied, feigning sincere joy at the meeting. Jared hugged her, and she could feel his heart beating faster. "How are you? What did you do without me?" "I was working, meeting clients, missing you," he lied, looking her straight in the eye. In the evening, Jared, as usual, sat in his home office at his computer, sorting through legal documents. Amanda was cooking dinner and watching him surreptitiously through the half-open door. At some point, he picked up his phone and started typing a message. His face lit up with anticipation, and he even smiled at the screen. Amanda knew that he was writing to Charlotte, but now the recipient would be a completely different person. "I miss your figure. I'm sending you something hot," Jared typed and attached to the message a video he shot in the bathroom a few minutes ago. In the video, he was naked and uttering vulgar comments about what he wanted to do with his mistress. The message went to the number of Gregory Foster, a federal prosecutor known for his stern temper and integrity. Amanda returned to the kitchen and continued cooking, feeling a strange sense of relief. The mechanism of revenge had been triggered, and now all that remained was to wait. She didn't know exactly what would happen, but she was convinced that Gregory would not let such an insult go without consequences. Jared and Charlotte will get what they deserve for their betrayal, and justice will prevail. At dinner, Jared was unusually gentle and attentive. He asked about her business trip, shared his plans for the upcoming weekend, and even offered to visit her parents, which he hadn't done in months. Amanda nodded and smiled, playing the role of a devoted wife, but inside she was burning with burning hatred. Every word he said seemed to be a lie, every look a mockery. When they went to bed, Jared tried to cuddle her, but Amanda said she was very tired after the trip. He didn't insist and quickly fell asleep, and she lay next to him and thought about what the next day would bring. Jared's smartphone was on the bedside table, and she could see the screen blinking intermittently from incoming notifications. Most likely it was Gregory, who was trying to figure out what was going on and who was sending him such outrageous messages. Prosecutor Gregory Foster sat in the conference room of the district attorney's office, attentively listening to a report on the results of a major anti-corruption operation. In front of him was a folder with the materials of the case, which promised to be sensational. 3 high-ranking officials of the city hall had been caught accepting bribes, and now it was necessary to decide exactly how to publicly expose them. Gregory liked those moments when justice prevailed over human greed and baseness. The phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. Gregory took it out and saw a message from an unknown caller with a video file. He frowned and quickly deleted it without opening it. Spam with obscene content had become a real problem lately, and he wasn't going to waste his time on such trash. As the report continued, Gregory returned to discussing the details of the upcoming arrests. A few minutes later, the phone beeped again. This time, a candid photo came with a man whom Gregory did not recognize. The face in the picture was blurred, but the body looked athletic and fit. Gregory deleted this message in disgust, mentally cursing the spammers. He even thought about blocking the number, but decided to wait. Perhaps it was a technical error. The third message came in the midst of an interrogation strategy discussion. Gregory stole a glance at the display and saw the video recording. Curiosity got the better of him, and he turned the volume down to a minimum, covering the phone with his hand. The same man appeared on the screen, but now he was talking, and the voice sounded familiar to Gregory. The man uttered obscenities, addressing a certain woman by name. When the name Charlotte was mentioned, Gregory's heart skipped a beat. He turned up the volume sharply and listened more attentively. The voice definitely belonged to Jared Ross, a lawyer they had encountered several times at court hearings. The man in the video talked about how he missed Charlotte's body, how he wanted to make love to her right now. Gregory's face hardened with every word he uttered. He got up from the table so suddenly that the chair fell back with a crash. The colleagues turned around, surprised by the unexpected reaction of the usually unflappable prosecutor. "I'm sorry, it's an urgent matter," Gregory muttered and hurriedly left the hall, clutching the phone in a trembling hand. In the hallway, he watched the video again, this time taking a closer look at the surroundings. The surroundings were unfamiliar, but some of the details in the background evoked vague associations. Gregory called the elevator and went to his private office. My thoughts were racing. His heart was pounding so loudly that he could hear it pounding in his ears. Perhaps it was some kind of mistake, provocation, or extortion attempt. But he recognized Jared's voice unmistakably, and his wife's name sounded too clear. He locked himself in his office and carefully examined all the materials he had received. The fourth message came when he was sitting at his desk, trying to collect his thoughts. This time, it was a photo of an intimate part of the body with the caption, "For my only Charlotte. I can't wait to see you tonight." Gregory felt a wave of primal rage rising inside him, which he had barely restrained during his years working in the prosecutor's office. He dialed his home phone number, but no one answered. Charlotte's cell phone was also silent. Gregory looked at his watch, 3:30 p.m. She should have been at home or at her real estate agency. Usually his wife always answered the phone, especially if it was him. The silence of the phones only intensified the suspicions that were growing in his head like a malignant tumor. Gregory gathered the documents into a leather briefcase and informed the secretary that he was going on an urgent matter. It took 20 minutes to get home, but it seemed like an eternity. He imagined various scenarios of a conversation with his wife, hoping that it would all turn out to be a ridiculous misunderstanding. Maybe someone used her name to frame him or Jared. In prosecutorial practice, such incidents occurred regularly. The key turned in the lock, and Gregory entered the hallway. The house greeted him with complete silence. The only sound was the ticking of the clock in the living room. He went through the rooms, checking to see if anyone was at home. In the bedroom, the bed was made, but not too neatly, as if someone was in a hurry. There was Charlotte's mobile phone on the bedside table, which explained why she wasn't answering her phone. Gregory took his wife's phone and tried to unlock it. He knew the password, the date of their wedding. The screen lit up, showing the desktop with the usual application icons. Gregory logged into the messenger and saw that the most recent messages had been deleted. The history of correspondence with several contacts was cleared, which seemed extremely suspicious to him. He went into the study, where there was a home computer. Charlotte often used it to work with real estate documents, and Gregory knew that she had set up automatic synchronization with cloud storage. If the correspondence was conducted via a computer, traces could remain in the cloud. The computer booted up, and Gregory logged into his wife's account, which he also knew the password for. He found a folder with backup copies of messages in the cloud storage. Charlotte, apparently, did not know about the existence of an automatic backup, which was created every week. Gregory opened the last file and saw the correspondence, which made his vision go dark. There are hundreds of messages between Charlotte and Jared dating back to the last 6 months. The correspondence began innocently, discussing business issues related to the purchase of the apartment that Jared wanted to purchase through Charlotte's agency. Gradually, the tone of the messages became more personal. There were compliments, hints, and then frank confessions of mutual sympathy. Gregory read how his wife flirted with the lawyer, how they planned dates and hid them from their spouses. Then there were the photos. Charlotte is wearing the underwear he bought her for her birthday. Charlotte is in their bedroom, on their bed, in positions that were meant only for him. Jared also took explicit pictures, and Gregory realized with horror that the two had sex in his house, in his bed, while he was working at the prosecutor's office. The most painful messages were about plans for a future together. Charlotte wrote that she was tired of the bland life with the prosecutor, that she wanted children with Jared, and was ready to divorce for this. Jared replied that he was also ready to leave his wife and start a new life. They discussed where they would live, how they would explain the divorce to relatives, and even chose names for future children. Gregory leaned back in his chair, feeling a hurricane of emotions raging inside him. Pain, humiliation, and rage mixed into one lump that stuck in his throat and made it difficult to breathe. 10 years of marriage, common plans, the dream of a full-fledged family. It all turned out to be a pure lie. Charlotte wasn't just cheating on him. She intended to ruin their lives and go to her lover. The sound of a key in the lock made him jump. Charlotte returned home. Gregory heard her go into the hallway, take off her shoes, and head for the bedroom. He quietly got up from the computer and followed her. He stopped in the bedroom doorway and saw his wife changing clothes, standing with her back to him. There were faint traces of kisses on her neck that hadn't been there in the morning. "Where have you been?" he asked softly. Charlotte turned around, and he saw the fright in her eyes, which she tried to hide behind a smile. "I worked with clients in the office." She went up to him and tried to kiss him, but Gregory pulled away. "I know about Jared," he said, looking her straight in the eye. Charlotte's face paled, but she still tried to look innocent. "What are you talking about?" Gregory took out his phone and showed her the video he had received just a few hours ago. Charlotte looked at the screen and realized that the game was over. Her legs gave out and she sank onto the edge of the bed. "Greg, I can explain everything," she began, but he abruptly cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Explain what? How did you fuck him in our bed? How did you plan to leave me and have children with him?" Gregory's voice grew louder, and Charlotte cringed in fear. She had never seen her husband in such a state of rage. Gregory grabbed her by the hair and dragged her to the computer desk. "Take a look at this. Look at your correspondence." He pushed her face into the monitor where their intimate correspondence was open. Charlotte sobbed and tried to pull away, but his grip was like steel. For half a year, you lied to my face and slept with that bastard. Please forgive me. I didn't want. That's how it happened. Charlotte fell to her knees and hugged his legs. I love you. It was a mistake. But Gregory no longer heard her pleading. Anger clouded his mind, and he forcefully pushed his wife away from him. Charlotte hit the wall with her back and slid to the floor, splitting her lip on the edge of the table. Get out of my house, he hissed through his teeth. Get out now, before I do something irreparable. Charlotte tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't hold her up. Blood from the split lip dripped onto the light carpet, leaving red marks. Greg, let me get some things, she asked in a trembling voice. Get out, he shouted so loudly that the window pane shook. Charlotte got up and rushed to the exit, not even trying to take her clothes or documents. Gregory heard the front door slam and was left alone in a house that no longer felt like his home. Everything here was a reminder of betrayal. The bed where she cheated on him, the bathroom where they took a shower after dating, the kitchen where she made him breakfast after nights with her lover. Gregory went into his office and opened the safe, where he kept important papers and something else. The unregistered pistol lay in the far corner, wrapped in an oiled cloth. He picked it up, checked the clip. All the cartridges were in place. The weapon was a trophy from one of the closed cases that had to be disposed of, but Gregory kept it for himself just in case. His hands were shaking with rage as he dialed Jared's number. The lawyer answered after the third ring, and his voice sounded calm and friendly. This is Gregory Foster. I urgently need legal advice on a confidential matter. I'll see you at your office in an hour. Jared agreed without the slightest hesitation, obviously hoping for a large fee from an influential client. Gregory put the gun in his briefcase and left the house. The evening air was cool, but he didn't feel cold. There was a fire of revenge burning inside him that demanded immediate gratification. Jared and Charlotte had ruined his life, and now he was going to ruin theirs. Justice must be restored, even if he has to achieve it with his own hands. Jared was sitting in his office at Lincoln Towers, going through the paperwork on a case that was going to bring him substantial income. The meeting with prosecutor Foster promised to be extremely profitable because he undoubtedly had connections in the highest echelons of power. Perhaps this will be the beginning of a long and productive cooperation. He even considered offering Gregory to become a partner in a new law firm. The phone vibrated, and Jared saw a message from Charlotte. He smiled and quickly typed in the answer. I'll be late at work, but I'll definitely come at night. Cook something special. The thought of meeting Charlotte soon warmed him more than the prospect of earning money. Soon they will be officially together, and these secret dates will be a thing of the past. Gregory parked his SUV outside the office complex on Main Street where Jared's law office was located. There was a pistol in the briefcase, the cold metal of which he could feel even through the skin of the bag. His hands were still shaking with rage, but now his anger was tinged with cold determination. Jared has to answer for destroying his family, for the humiliation he caused, for the lies that lasted for months. The security guard in the lobby nodded respectfully at him. Prosecutor Foster's face was well known in the city. Gregory went up to the 7th floor, where the lawyer's office was located. The hallway was empty. Most of the staff have already gone home. The only light coming from under the door of Jared's office was the sound of keys tapping. Gregory stopped in front of the door, gathering his courage. Then he knocked. Come in, a familiar voice called. Gregory pushed open the door and entered a spacious office furnished with expensive furniture. Jared was sitting at a massive table made of dark wood. There were documents and an open laptop in front of him. Seeing the prosecutor, the lawyer stood up and extended his hand to greet him. Gregory, it's good to see you. Please have a seat. Gregory did not return the greeting, but instead turned the key in the lock. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the office. Jared frowned, not understanding the reason for this precaution. Gregory, has something happened? You look worried. His voice sounded calm, but there was a wariness in his eyes. Gregory took a pistol out of his briefcase and pointed it at the lawyer. Jared paled and instinctively stepped back, knocking over his chair. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" His voice was trembling with fear. His hands went up in a defensive gesture. Gregory held the weapon steady. His finger was on the trigger. "Show me the correspondence with my wife. All of it, every message, or I'll smash your brains on this expensive furniture." Jared tried to keep his composure. "I don't understand what you're talking about. What kind of correspondence? I don't talk to Charlotte." But his eyes betrayed the lie, and Gregory noticed it. The prosecutor took a step forward, and Jared felt the cold metal of the barrel against his temple. "Don't lie to me. I've seen your videos. I've heard your voice. Take out your phone immediately." With trembling hands, Jared took out his cell phone from his jacket pocket. The screen unlocked with a touch of his finger, and he logged into the messenger. "Look, I do correspond with Charlotte, but this is only a real estate business correspondence." He showed the screen to Gregory, hoping that he would believe in the innocence of their communication. Gregory picked up his phone and started reading the messages. What he saw made his blood boil even more. In correspondence with Charlotte, there were his own answers. "What nonsense are you talking about? Stop sending this filth." "Who are you?" Jared sent intimate messages and photos and received outraged refusals in response. Gregory's eyes turned bloodshot with the realization of what had happened. "Someone changed the number," he whispered, realizing the scale of the setup. "Someone changed Charlotte's number to mine, and you were sending me these nasty things, thinking you were texting her." Jared realized with horror that he had fallen into a trap, but it was too late to explain anything. Gregory was beside himself with rage, and logical arguments no longer interested him. "But you slept with my wife anyway," the prosecutor shouted and hit Jared in the face with the butt of a pistol. There was the sound of a nose breaking. Blood splattered on the lawyer's white shirt. Jared howled in pain and fell to the floor, pressing his hands to his face. Blood oozed between his fingers, staining the expensive carpet a deep red. Gregory bent over his fallen opponent and began kicking him in the ribs. "You slept with my wife in my house, in my bed." Each blow was accompanied by a new accusation, a new wave of rage. Jared tried to defend himself, but his strength was unequal. His ribs cracked under the blows. His breathing became increasingly labored. "Stop, please. I can explain everything." Jared tried to get up on all fours, but Gregory kicked him in the stomach again. The lawyer bent over in pain and began to crawl towards the door, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His expensive suit was torn and stained with blood. His face was swollen from the blows. Gregory grabbed him by the legs and dragged him back to the center of the office. "Where are you going? We haven't finished talking yet." Jared struggled desperately, clinging to the legs of the chairs and the edge of the table. There was animal fear in his eyes. He understood that the prosecutor could kill him right there. In a desperate attempt to free himself, Jared jerked his whole body violently, trying to pull his legs out of Gregory's grip. The movement was too sudden and uncontrollable. He lost his balance and hit his left temple on the sharp corner of the marble table with all his might. There was a dull, wet crunch that made Gregory let go of his legs. Jared collapsed to the floor and didn't move anymore. Blood was pumping from a head wound, forming a growing puddle on the expensive parquet floor. His eyes were closed. His breathing became shallow and ragged. Gregory stood over him, still clutching the gun in his hand, and looked at the result of his rage. Suddenly, it dawned on him what had happened. Jared was lying unconscious in a pool of blood, and it was unclear if he was even alive. The rage was instantly replaced by panic. Gregory knelt down next to the lawyer and tried to feel the pulse in his neck. My heart was beating, but very weakly and unevenly. Blood continued to ooze from the wound, staining the prosecutor's fingers red. Jared, wake up." Gregory tried to bring him back to consciousness, but to no avail. He took off his jacket and applied it to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The expensive fabric was instantly soaked in blood, but the flow did not stop. Gregory realized that the injury was serious, possibly fatal. The panic was growing by the second. If Jared dies, his career will be ruined, and he will end up behind bars. All plans for revenge will collapse, but justice will not prevail. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed 911. Ambulance? Accident. The man fell, hit his head. We need an ambulance. It's urgent. The dispatcher started asking questions about the location and nature of the injuries, but Gregory barely heard her words. He looked at Jared's motionless body and realized that he had gone too far. Revenge had turned against him, and now he could lose everything: his job, his freedom, his future. The blood on his hands was proof that justice sometimes demands too high a price. Address: Office Center on Central Avenue, 7th floor, room 704. He dictated to the dispatcher. The man is unconscious, bleeding heavily from the head. Come quickly. He hung up the phone and bent over Jared again, still pressing his jacket to the wound. Blood seeped through the fabric, forming new stains on the floor. Gregory looked around, assessing the situation. The office looked like the scene of a violent fight. Overturned chairs, blood on the floor and walls, scattered documents. It was necessary to come up with something urgently, some version of events that would explain what had happened: self-defense, an accident, a sudden attack of aggression by a lawyer. He quickly put the gun back in his briefcase and tried to put himself in order. There were bloodstains on the shirt, but they could be explained by an attempt to provide first aid. His hair was tousled and his face was red from exertion, but it also fit into the picture of a man who was trying to save the victim. The sound of an ambulance siren startled him. The paramedics were coming up the stairs, their voices echoing down the hallway. Gregory took one last look at Jared. He still hadn't regained consciousness. The breathing was barely noticeable. Perhaps the lawyer will never wake up again, and if he does, he may not remember what happened. The door burst open, and medics rushed into the office with stretchers and equipment. What happened? The senior paramedic asked, quickly assessing the situation. Gregory tried to speak calmly and convincingly. We discussed business issues. He suddenly became aggressive, started shouting, then stumbled and hit his head on the table. I immediately called an ambulance. The paramedics bent over Jared, checking his vital signs. Severe traumatic brain injury, possibly a fracture of the base of the skull, the doctor stated. We need urgent hospitalization and surgery. They quickly and professionally fixed the victim's head, installed an IV drip, and put him on a stretcher. Are you a relative? The paramedic asked Gregory. No, colleague. We met on business matters. Then you will need to give a statement to the police. They've already left. Gregory's heart sank with fear, but he nodded, feigning willingness to cooperate. Of course, I'll tell you everything I saw. The paramedics carried Jared out of the office, leaving Gregory alone with the consequences of his rage. The blood on the floor had already begun to dry, turning into dark crusts. The air was thick with the metallic smell of blood and fear. Gregory understood that his life had changed forever, that he had crossed a line beyond which there was no turning back. A few minutes later, the police entered the office. The senior lieutenant introduced himself and started asking questions about the incident. Gregory told the prepared version: a business meeting, sudden aggression by a lawyer, an accident. His status as a prosecutor played in his favor. The police treated him with respect and did not question his words. We will draw up a protocol, but technically it looks like an accident, the lieutenant said. If the victim survives and is able to testify, we will continue the investigation. Gregory nodded, praying inwardly that Jared would either die or lose his memory. Any other outcome could destroy his carefully constructed version of events. When the police finished examining the scene, Gregory was finally able to leave the office. He drove home in complete silence, thinking about what had happened. Revenge had come, but not in the way he had planned. Instead of justice, it turned out to be a bloodbath that could have buried his career and life. Now, all that remained was to wait and hope that luck would be on his side. The operating room at St. Jude Hospital in the city was flooded with the bright light of surgical lamps. Neurosurgeon Dr. Alan Sorensen bent over the operating table where Jared lay, with a shaved head and an open skull. The assistants handed over the instruments. The nurse monitored the vital signs on the monitors. The picture was disappointing. An extensive hematoma was compressing the brain tissue, and a fracture of the temporal bone threatened with irreversible consequences. Aspirator, the surgeon ordered curtly, removing blood clots from the skull. Under the bright lights, it was visible how the damaged areas of the brain had an unnatural color and consistency. Dr. Sorensen had been working for 20 years and had seen many traumatic brain injuries, but this one was especially severe. The blow landed precisely in the temporal region, where the most important blood vessels and nerve centers pass. The pressure is dropping, the anesthesiologist reported, watching the readings of the instruments. Jared's pulse became increasingly erratic, and his blood pressure dropped to critical levels. The surgeon accelerated the pace of the operation, realizing that there was very little time left. He carefully removed the bone fragments and tried to stop the internal bleeding, but the damage was too severe. 4 hours later, the operation was completed. Dr. Sorensen took off his gloves and sighed heavily, looking at the patient's motionless body. Extensive brain damage, the chances are minimal, he told the resident who recorded the post-operative appointments. Even if he survives, he may remain in a vegetative state. We need to warn our relatives about the seriousness of the situation. Jared was transferred to the intensive care unit, where he was connected to artificial life support devices. A lot of tubes and wires entangled his body. The monitors showed weak but stable vital signs. His head was bandaged, his face was swollen from the blows, and the right side of his body remained paralyzed. The doctors could only wait and hope for a miracle. Amanda received a call from the police at 10:30 in the evening. She was sitting at home, trying to read a book, but her thoughts kept coming back to what she had done. When the phone rang, my heart jumped into my throat. "Mrs. Williams, this is the duty officer from the 5th Precinct. Your husband had an accident. He's in the hospital, in serious condition." The world swam around her. Amanda expected some consequences of her revenge, but not so serious. "What happened? Where is he?" she asked in a trembling voice, although deep down she already knew the answer. "Head injury in the office. The hospital will tell you the details. Come as soon as possible." The phone went silent, leaving Amanda alone with the horror of realizing that her revenge plan had gone too far. It took 20 minutes to get to the clinic, but it seemed like an eternity. Amanda sat in the taxi and prayed that things weren't as bad with Jared as she was beginning to suspect. Maybe it really was an accident unrelated to her phone number substitution. Gregory might not even have received those messages, but deep down she knew that wasn't the case. The reception area of the clinic was bustling as usual at night. Amanda ran up to the nurse on duty and called her husband's name. "Williams is Jared Aronovich. He's in intensive care after surgery. You need to talk to your doctor." The nurse pointed to a hallway where several uniformed men were standing outside the office of the department head. Detective Riley introduced himself and invited Amanda into a private office for a chat. He was a middle-aged man with a tired face and attentive eyes. "Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you a few questions about your husband. How has your relationship been developing lately? Were there any conflicts or problems?" His tone was polite but insistent. Amanda tried to look as convincing as possible. "We have a perfect marriage. There were no problems. Jared is a wonderful husband. We love each other." The words were hard to come by. Every single one of them was a lie, but she understood that she had to play the role of a loving spouse. The detective watched her reaction carefully, making notes in a notebook. "It's strange," Riley continued, "because the circumstances of what happened raise questions. Your husband met with prosecutor Foster at his office. According to Foster, your husband suddenly became aggressive and, as a result, fell, hitting his head. But the medical examination shows that the injuries do not correspond to a simple fall." Amanda felt her stomach tighten with fear. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she replied, trying to keep her composure. Jared has never been an aggressive person. Maybe there was some misunderstanding." The detective nodded, but his eyes remained suspicious. "Perhaps we will continue the investigation when your husband regains consciousness and is able to tell his version of events." After talking with the investigator, Amanda was finally able to see her husband. The sight of Jared in intensive care shocked her to the core. He lay motionless, surrounded by medical equipment. His face was barely recognizable due to the swelling and bruising. The bandaged head, the tubes in his nose and throat, the wires from the monitors, all this created a picture of a man teetering on the brink of life and death. The doctor on duty explained to her the severity of the situation. Severe traumatic brain injury coma. It's too early to make predictions, but you have to be prepared for the worst. Even if he survives, serious consequences are possible: paralysis, loss of speech, memory impairment. Amanda listened to these words as a verdict, realizing that her revenge had turned into a tragedy. In the hallway of the hospital, she bumped into Charlotte. My friend looked terrible. His face was bandaged, bruises were visible on his hands, and his eyes were red from crying. When Charlotte saw Amanda, she attacked her with accusations. "It's you. You set it up. Greg almost killed Jared because of you. You wanted revenge." Her voice was trembling with rage and despair. Amanda tried to look innocent. "What are you talking about? I just found out about the incident from the police." But Charlotte didn't believe a word of it. "Don't lie to me. Greg was getting some messages. He thought it was from Jared. Someone set up this meeting. Who else could have known about our relationship?" She was crying and screaming at the same time, attracting the attention of the medical staff. The hospital guards approached them, trying to calm Charlotte down. "Woman, there's a clinic here. Keep quiet." Charlotte pulled away from their arms and looked at Amanda with hatred once more. "I'll prove that it's your fault. Jared shouldn't have suffered so much because of your revenge." She turned around and walked away, leaving Amanda alone with the guilt gnawing at her from the inside out. Meanwhile, Gregory used all his connections in the prosecutor's office to hush up the case. He met with the head of the investigative department and explained the situation in a favorable light for himself. "Lawyer Williams invited me for a consultation, but he behaved inappropriately. He may have been under the influence of illegal substances or alcohol. I tried to calm him down, but he fell and hit his head. It was an accident." The head of the department, who had been responsible to Gregory on several previous cases, agreed to help. "I understand, Gregory. Such things happen. We'll file it as a self-defense accident. There were no witnesses." Gregory nodded, feeling relieved. Nobody. And the cameras in the office were just for prevention. It was a lie, but there was no one to verify it. Detective Riley received a call from his superiors an hour after talking to Amanda. "Riley, we're closing the Williams case. It was an accident. No criminal circumstances. Get the paperwork done and move on to other things." The investigator tried to object, but there are oddities there. "The medical examination shows." "No buts," his boss interrupted him. "The case is closed. This is an order from above." Riley hung up the phone with a feeling of disappointment. He had been with the police long enough to know when a case was being hushed up for political reasons. Obviously, Prosecutor Foster had enough influence to avoid a serious investigation, but the detective wasn't just going to give up. He will continue to study the circumstances of the case informally. Amanda spent the whole night in the hospital, sitting next to her husband's bed. She held his hand and whispered words of remorse that he couldn't hear. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted you to be punished for infidelity, but not like this." Tears dripped onto the hospital blanket, mixing with the guilt that corroded her soul. By morning, Jared's condition had stabilized, but he was still in a coma. Doctors said it could last days, weeks, or even months. Amanda understood that she had to be prepared for a long struggle for the life of her husband, whom she herself had put at risk. The irony of the situation was cruel. Now she had to play the role of a caring wife, praying for the recovery of the man she wanted to punish. A silhouette appeared in the doorway of the ward. Gregory was standing in the doorway. His face was pale and tired. He stared at Amanda intently, and in his gaze there was an understanding of what had really happened. "I know it was you who changed the number," he said quietly, so as not to attract the attention of the nurses. "We'll talk about it later." Amanda felt her blood run cold. If Gregory guessed her role in what happened, then her life could turn into a nightmare. The prosecutor had enough power and connections to destroy her if he wanted to. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she tried to object, but her voice was trembling with fear. Gregory smiled coldly. "You understand perfectly. Who else could have known about Jared's affair with my wife? Who else had access to his phone? You've set it up very cleverly, but you haven't taken one thing into account. Now we are connected by a common secret, and if I go down, I'll drag you down with me." He turned around and walked away, leaving Amanda in a state of panic. Now she realized that she had fallen into a trap of her own making. Revenge was accomplished, but the price was too high. Jared lay dying. Charlotte suspected her of incitement, and Gregory knew the truth and could use it against her. Amanda was left alone with her guilt and fear of the future, which promised to be no less gloomy than the present. The 2 weeks in the clinic seemed like an eternity. Amanda spent her days at her husband's bedside, reading books to him that he couldn't hear and talking to a man who couldn't answer. Doctors said that sometimes patients in a coma perceive speech, and this can help them return to consciousness. She clung to that hope, trying to stifle the guilt that was eating away at her from the inside out. On Wednesday morning, when Amanda was reading Jared an article from a magazine about new treatments for head injuries, she noticed that his eyelids twitched. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then Jared slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were bleary and confused. He was trying to focus on the objects around him. Amanda grabbed his hand and felt a faint answering squeeze. "Jared, darling, can you hear me?" She pressed the nurse's call button. My heart was pounding with joy and fear at the same time. Jared tried to say something, but only indistinct sounds came out of his mouth. His right arm remained motionless, and his face was contorted. The left side was working fine, but the right side seemed to freeze. The nurse ran into the room and immediately called the doctor. Dr. Sorensen conducted a quick checkup and stated what everyone was afraid of: right-sided hemiparesis, aphasia. The right side of the body is paralyzed. Speech functions are seriously impaired. He shone a flashlight into Jared's eyes, tested his reflexes, and asked simple questions. Jared understood what was going on, but he couldn't answer with words, just mumbled and pointed with his eyes. After the doctor left, Jared stared at Amanda for a long time. There was horror and pleading in his eyes, as if he was trying to say something very important. Amanda leaned closer to him, trying to figure out what he wanted. "What, honey? What do you want to tell me?" Jared raised his left hand with difficulty and pointed at her, then at himself. His eyes filled with tears. The following days were devoted to rehabilitation. The speech therapist worked with Jared on speech restoration. The physiotherapist was trying to develop a paralyzed side of the body. Progress has been slow and painful. Jared could only pronounce single syllables, and his right hand remained lifeless. Doctors said that a full recovery was unlikely, but they did not rule out partial improvement with long-term therapy. Amanda received a message from an unknown number asking for a meeting at the old Fort Cafe. The caption was laconic: "Detective Riley, we need to talk." She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she still felt afraid. In 2 weeks, she almost believed that the case was really closed, and no one would dig deeper. The cafe was half empty, and soft music was playing. Riley was sitting in the far corner. There was a folder of documents in front of him. He looked tired but determined. "Mrs. Williams, thank you for coming. I have something to show you." He opened the folder and took out the printouts of the messages. "I checked the metadata of all the messages that Prosecutor Foster received on the day of the incident." Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. The printouts clearly showed the senders and recipients' numbers, the time of sending, and even the geolocation. The messages were sent from your husband's phone to Prosecutor Foster's number, but in the phone contact, this number was recorded as Charlotte Foster's number. You switched the contact. His voice was calm, but there was confidence in his eyes. "I don't understand what you're talking about," Amanda tried to protest, but her voice was shaking. Riley took out another document. The technical examination showed that the contact was changed the day before the incident. The time of the change coincides with your return from a business trip. This is not an accident. This is a provocation that led to an attempted murder. The detective leaned across the table. His gaze hardened. "Give me evidence against Foster. Tell me the whole truth, and I guarantee he'll go to jail. Otherwise, I will be forced to file a case against you for incitement to a serious crime. I have enough evidence to charge you." Amanda knew that she had fallen into a trap from which there was no easy way out. "I need time to think," she said, getting up from the table. Riley nodded. "I'll give you 3 days. After that, I will act according to the law, regardless of your decision. Think about your husband. He suffered because of your revenge. Are you really going to let the culprit go unpunished?" Amanda left the cafe, feeling her last hope that everything would be all right crumble. The next day, Charlotte came to the clinic. She looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and cheap clothes. After Gregory kicked her out of the house, she lived with a friend, trying to find work and housing. When she saw Jared in such a state, she burst into tears. "Jared, what have they done to you? It's all because of me. I'm so sorry." Jared looked at her and tried to say something. The nurse brought a tablet with large letters, which he learned to use for communication. With his left hand, he slowly, with great difficulty, began to swipe on the screen. Each letter was an effort, and his fingers wouldn't work, but he persevered. Finally, the word "leave" appeared on the screen. Charlotte couldn't believe her eyes. "What, Jared? Is it me? You're Charlotte?" But he kept typing. His face was contorted in a grimace of effort and pain. The next word appeared a minute later. "Forever." Charlotte clutched at her heart as if she had received a physical blow. "You can't say that. We loved each other. We planned to be together." Jared closed his eyes. His body began to convulse. The monitors chirped, showing critical pulse and blood pressure values. The nurse ran into the room and pressed the alarm button. "Everyone out." Charlotte backed away from the door, unable to believe that the man for whom she had ruined her marriage was now rejecting her. In the hallway, she ran into Amanda, who came running at the sound of the alarm. "He sent me away," Charlotte whispered. "He said to leave forever. But I lost everything for him. My husband, my house, my reputation." Amanda looked at her ex-friend and felt a strange mixture of pity and satisfaction. Justice has been done, but at what cost? Meanwhile, Gregory received a summons to be questioned by the federal prosecutor's office. He understood that his connections in the district attorney's office would not help at the federal level. The case was clearly publicized, and someone at the top decided to look into the situation. On the appointed day, he arrived at the building of the federal prosecutor's office, trying to maintain confidence, but inside everything was shrinking with fear. There were 3 people waiting for him in his office: Detective Riley, a Homeland Security official, and prosecutor from Washington, D.C. There were folders of evidence on the table, which looked impressive. "Mr. Foster, we have serious questions about the incident with Attorney Williams," the Metropolitan Prosecutor began. "The circumstances of the case do not correspond to your testimony." Riley opened the first folder. "The recording from the camera of the neighboring building shows that you entered the office center with a briefcase and left without it. Where's the briefcase?" Gregory tried to keep calm. "I left it at the office. I forgot it in a hurry. There were documents for consultation." But his voice sounded uncertain. The internal security representative took out the following document: the testimony of the cleaner Maria Curtis. She was working on the 6th floor and heard screams and sounds of fighting from room 704. According to her, it lasted at least 10 minutes. How does this fit in with your version of a sudden fall? The most frightening thing was the medical report. The medical examiner from the Capitol reviewed all the materials and came to the conclusion that Jared's injuries did not correspond to a simple fall. Multiple bruises on the body, a broken nose, rib damage, all of this pointed to a beating, and a head injury could only be sustained by a strong impact on a hard surface at a certain angle. The Metropolitan prosecutor closed the folder and looked at Gregory. "We have reason to believe that you used physical violence against lawyer Williams, which resulted in severe bodily injuries. This qualifies as attempted murder. Do you want to change your testimony?" Gregory understood that the game was over, but he still hoped for a miracle. "I demand a lawyer," he said, using his right to defend himself. The prosecutor nodded. "That's right, but the evidence speaks for itself. We are opening a criminal case under the article attempted murder. You will be removed from office until the investigation is completed." Gregory felt everything he had lived and worked for many years crumbling. As he left the prosecutor general's office, he thought about how quickly life could change. A month ago, he was a respected prosecutor with an impeccable reputation, a happy family man with plans for the future. Now he has become a suspect in a serious crime. His wife was cheating on him with another man, and his career was in ruins. Emptiness awaited him at home. Charlotte never returned after the night he kicked her out. He walked through the rooms where everything reminded him of their former lives, their photos together, gifts, things they bought together. Now it all seemed like the scenery for a play that ended in tragedy. Gregory poured himself a whiskey and sat in an armchair, looking out the window at the city that no longer seemed like home to him. The trial was starting tomorrow, and Gregory knew there was little chance of an acquittal. The evidence was too convincing, and public opinion was against him. A prosecutor accused of beating a lawyer to a pulp out of jealousy could not expect leniency. He was thinking about Amanda, who had set it up so cleverly. She got her way, ruined the lives of everyone who betrayed her trust. But at what cost? Her husband was left disabled. Charlotte has lost everything, and he himself is going to court. Revenge turned out to be a double-edged sword that wounded everyone without exception. The courtroom was packed with journalists and curious public. The case of a prosecutor accused of attempted murder of a lawyer out of jealousy has attracted national attention. Amanda sat in the witness chair, feeling dozens of eyes on her. Her lawyer had instructed her in advance how to behave, what to say, and what to avoid. The main thing is to present yourself as a victim of circumstances, a woman who was simply defending her rights. The prosecutor, who was sent from the federal center, was an experienced professional. "Mrs. Williams, tell the court what made you take the actions that led to the tragic consequences." She took a deep breath and began to tell her version of events. "I returned from a business trip and found traces of another woman's presence in our house. My husband's phone was in correspondence with my best friend Charlotte. Amanda took out of her bag the printouts of messages that her lawyer had prepared in advance. Here are screenshots of their correspondence. They planned to destroy our families. They wanted me and Mr. Foster to be left with nothing." Her voice was trembling with supposedly pent-up emotions, but in fact, she felt strangely satisfied. Finally, the truth about Jared and Charlotte's betrayal has become public knowledge. The jurors carefully studied the documents, and their faces showed sympathy for the deceived wife. The prosecutor continued the interrogation. "How did you feel when you found out about the betrayal?" Amanda covered her face with her hands, feigning deep shock. "My world has collapsed. 10 years of marriage. He called me a fool and planned to leave me. Charlotte was my best friend. I trusted her with my innermost secrets." "And then you decided to change your husband's phone number?" Amanda nodded without looking up. "I wanted Mr. Foster to find out the truth about his wife. I thought he'd just talk to her. Maybe they'll get divorced. I never imagined it would come to violence. This was the key moment in her defense. She was supposed to look like a naive woman who did not foresee the consequences." Gregory's lawyer tried to discredit her testimony. "Mrs. Williams, didn't you know about my client's short temper? Didn't you realize that such a provocation could lead to tragedy?" Amanda looked at him with genuine bewilderment. I knew Mr. Foster as a balanced person, a prosecutor with an impeccable reputation. How could I have guessed that he was capable of such a thing? The hall roared as a wheelchair with Jared was brought in. During the months of rehabilitation, he learned to pronounce individual words, although his speech remained severely impaired. The right side of his body was completely paralyzed, his head tilted to the side. Amanda looked at her husband and felt a pang of conscience. He looked like a shadow of his former self. The speech therapist helped Jared to testify. Every word was coming to him with great difficulty. His face was contorted with tension. He wants to kill me, he said, pointing with his left hand at Gregory. Beat, pistoletom, on the face. The audience froze in silence, listening to these painful confessions. Even the most cynical journalists felt compassion for the crippled man. Gregory sat in the dock with his head down. The months of investigation and waiting for the trial had aged him by years. Gray appeared in his hair, his face was haggard, hopelessness was visible in his eyes. When Jared testified, he did not look up, realizing that every word of the victim was another nail in the coffin of his freedom. The prosecutor was merciless in his speech. Gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about how jealousy and rage turned a respected prosecutor into a violent criminal. Gregory Foster didn't just beat up William's lawyer, he tried to kill him. Only an accident saved the victim's life. But at what cost? A talented young man has become an invalid. He pointed to the medical reports. Multiple fractures, traumatic brain injury, paralysis of the right side of the body, speech impairment. Jared Williams will never be able to return to a full life, and all because the defendant couldn't control his emotions. I demand the maximum penalty, 12 years in prison for attempted murder. Gregory's lawyer tried to commute the sentence, citing passion and provocation. My client is a man with an impeccable reputation who has devoted his life to serving the law. He was the victim of a carefully planned provocation. Amanda Williams deliberately pushed him to do this, knowing about his character. Gregory Foster acted in a state of intense emotional agitation caused by the sudden revelation of his wife's betrayal. But the jury has already made up its mind. They saw Jared's mutilated body, heard Amanda's story of betrayal, and studied medical records. Whatever the provocations, violence could not be justified. After a 2-hour meeting, they issued a verdict, guilty of attempted murder under aggravating circumstances. The judge announced the verdict in a measured voice. Gregory Foster pleads guilty to attempted murder committed in a state of passion. Taking into account the severity of the consequences, but taking into account the provocative circumstances and the previously impeccable reputation of the defendant, the court sentences him to 10 years of imprisonment in a high-security colony. The guards approached Gregory to handcuff him. He got up slowly and looked around the room one last time. His gaze landed on Amanda, who was sitting in the front row. When he got closer, he bent down and whispered in her ear, "You've ruined 4 lives because of your revenge. I hope it was worth it." Amanda didn't answer, but her face contorted for a moment, either in triumph or regret. After the trial, the lives of all the participants in the drama changed dramatically. Amanda filed for divorce from Jared, citing the impossibility of living together due to his condition. The court satisfied her claims and awarded her all the jointly acquired property as compensation for moral damage. The apartment, the country house, the car, the bank accounts, everything went to her. Jared was transferred to a specialized boarding school for people with disabilities. He was visited only by doctors and social workers. His former colleagues and friends gradually forgot about him, unable to bear the sight of a once successful lawyer who had turned into a helpless invalid. He could only blink and nod, and sometimes uttered isolated words, but he never regained coherent speech. Charlotte could not stand the shame and pressure of public opinion. After the trial, when all the details of her betrayal became public, she lost her job and friends. Neighbors pointed fingers at her and whispered behind her back in the shops. She sold the last of her jewelry, bought a bus ticket, and left for another state where no one knew her story. In the new city, Charlotte got a job as a salesman in a small store, rented a room in a dormitory, and lived under a false name. She had aged 10 years in a few months. Her hair was damp, and her eyes were filled with constant anxiety. Sometimes at night, she dreamed of Jared, healthy and laughing as he was before the tragedy. She woke up crying, realizing that she would never forgive herself for what had happened. Amanda was thriving. She sold the apartment and the country house, receiving a substantial sum for them. The money allowed her to start a new life in another country. She received a job offer from an international company that valued her professional skills and was not interested in her personal history. The visa was issued quickly, and the tickets were purchased. On the last day before leaving, Amanda arrived at the ocean. Waves rolled steadily on the sand. Seagulls screamed over the water. She took out the engagement ring she had been wearing for 10 years from her bag. The gold ring glinted in the sun as she lifted it over her head. "Goodbye, past life," she whispered and threw the ring into the waves. The metal disappeared into the foaming water, taking with it the last memories of a marriage that turned out to be a lie. Amanda felt strangely light, as if heavy chains had been removed from her. Revenge had been accomplished, justice had been done, and she had been given the freedom she had dreamed of. The price was high, but she did not regret what she had done. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. A representative of the company that offered her the job called. "Mrs. Williams, everything is ready for your move. Tomorrow you will be met at the airport, shown your apartment, and introduced to your colleagues. New life, new opportunities." She smiled through the tears that suddenly came to her eyes. "Thanks. I'm ready," she replied, looking at the horizon where the sky merged with the sea. "I'm free," she whispered to the wind, which blew her hair. These words sounded like a spell, like a promise to herself never to let anyone deceive and humiliate her again. The taxi arrived exactly at the appointed time. The driver helped load the suitcases, and the car started moving towards the airport. Amanda turned around one last time to look at the city that had been her home for so long. Now he's in the past, along with all the pain, betrayal, and revenge. There was a new country ahead, a new job, new people who knew nothing about its history. On the plane, she opened a magazine and read an article about how to start life from scratch. The author wrote that everyone deserves a second chance, the opportunity to correct mistakes and build a happy future. Amanda closed her eyes and imagined herself a year from now, successful, confident, surrounded by new friends and perhaps a new love. The plane took off, carrying her towards an unknown future. 4 ruined lives remained below, a tragedy that began with a simple desire to avenge betrayal. But Amanda didn't look back. She looked only forward to where the freedom she had earned at such a high price awaited her.